Hi, my name's Michael Angelella, and I'm the assistant professor in screenwriting here at Towson University, and I'm really excited to spend a few minutes talking to you about what I do and what I love, which is storytelling. And there's a lot of that goes on here at Towson in a lot of different forms, and hopefully if you're pursuing an EMF major, we'll have an opportunity to work together in any number of classes. But the common thread to everything that I do here at Towson is storytelling, and that's really what I'd like to dig into with you a little bit today. Let me start by talking a bit about myself. I'm from Baltimore originally, and I guess from about high school on, I knew that I wanted to get involved in making films of one kind or another, and ended up going to school at University of Southern Cal, which is, as many of you probably know, is a great magnet for students who are interested in film because of all the great teachers there, and had a wonderful opportunity to pursue a degree there in what they called professional writing, which really was a great program that was a hybrid of different forms, writing a novel, writing for theater, writing film scripts, and really had an opportunity to be exposed to all different kinds of film writing, and it was a great learning experience for me. But what I soon discovered after that is that this whole business of the craft of storytelling is really a lifelong pursuit. There's no crash course. There are no shortcuts to this. It's like any great craft. It's something that really takes a lifetime of work, of pursuit of all the different ways to tell stories and to tell them well. And that's really my aim in this program, is to really not just sort of go through the motions, but to do a deep dive with the students in each of my classes about what is a story, what makes a good story, and then how to make that happen on paper. I believe that storytelling is the greatest invention of humankind. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Why? Because I think ultimately it's the thing that makes us different from every other life form on this planet. Story is the thing that we use, the invention that we use to communicate with each other and to find meaning in why we're here. And I don't just mean this in a purely philosophical vein. This is something that happens every day, every moment in our lives. It's on our 24-hour news channels. It's what happens when we're in the multiplex watching the films. It's what happens when we're sitting around with our families and we're talking about stories that have happened to people close to us. Without story, there is no meaning to life. There's no legacy that we leave behind. There's no beginning, middle, or end. There's no purpose to what we do. But with story, there's all of that, and there's more. It's the thing that we use to transform ourselves, to make ourselves better. It's a tool that has been around for many centuries that we use to improve the quality of our lives and to teach from generation to generation what we've learned and how to make tomorrow better than today. Stories are equipment for living. Stories used to be used as a tool for teaching children. Still are today. I mean, in the most basic form, Aesop's fables were conceived that way. The whole notion of, I guess you probably know the boy who cried wolf story, sort of to teach children to always tell the truth. Or Little Red Riding Hood, the notion of teaching children not to stray from the path, to always do what you're told. And you pay the price for not doing what you're told in that particular tale. Stories are not necessarily what the sort of illuminate the meaning of life. But they are the thing that enable us to experience the wonder of being alive. One of my favorite stories is the movie, maybe some of you have seen it, called Field of Dreams, which is about Kevin Costner who plows under his cornfield so that he can build a baseball diamond, and the ghosts of the ball players come back and play baseball. And, people can feel a lot of different things about that particular film, that it's a supernatural film, it's a comedy, drama, or whatever. But for me, and it's probably the reason that I watch that film whenever it's on, to me, that story really is about the last scene in the movie. And this is what I'm talking about before, about how story can illuminate the meaning of life. And that scene is when Costner plays catch with his father. I don't know if any of you remember this, but there's an opportunity for him to basically meet his father, whom he had a strained relationship with when he was growing up. Story is an opportunity for people to connect. People hunger for connection. It's really at the core of the history of civilization. There would be no civilization if we didn't connect. We'd all be recluses, and there would be nothing. Somebody has said that stories are the oxygen of civilization, and I believe that. I mean, I've even thought about this. Another one of my favorite films, and we could talk about this at some point, is Castaway with Tom Hanks. And I have bet to myself that Tom Hanks told stories to Wilson in Castaway. I've thought about their time together off screen. You know who Wilson is, right? It's the soccer ball. He painted the face of a person on the soccer ball to keep him from losing his sanity. See, that's really a perfect illustration of what I'm talking about, the need to connect. If we don't have someone to talk to tell stories to, we lose our minds. There's no meaning. So I've thought that that's probably what he did. He told stories to Wilson, and in the end, you had a sense that in his own mind, he'd been hearing stories from Wilson in return. It's probably also the reason that the Lost Boys hungered for Wendy, in Peter Pan, to tell them bedtime stories. Do you remember that? I mean, that's really what this is about. It's such a simple idea, but incredibly powerful. It's like the engine of our lives if you really get down to thinking about it. Sounds overly simplified, but it's sort of the DNA of everything that I like to do here at Towson, and that is that story equals character in conflict. Okay? Basically, who wants what? Why do they want it? What's stopping them from getting it? Okay, is it something internal inside them? For example, fear. Do you remember the movie French Kiss with Meg Ryan? She wanted to fly, but she couldn't because she had a terrible fear of flying. So that's what I mean by internal. Or is it something external? Do you remember in Terminator, the Linda Hamilton character is on the run for her life because the cyborg Arnold Schwarzenegger is trying to kill her? That's what I mean by external conflict. But go back to that. Story means a character. It's about somebody in conflict. In conflict meaning because they want something, but there's something that's keeping them from getting what they want. If you think about any good story that you like, that formula, don't mean it to sound like it's a connect the dots type of thing, but that basic conceit is at the heart of any good story that you can think of. So let's talk a little bit about how storytelling has evolved all the way to today. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to go into great depth on this, but clearly the very earliest forms of storytelling is what we were talking about, the spoken word, the sitting around the campfires, the passing of stories from one generation to another. And then, of course, that tradition really became the whole grand tradition of folk tales from all the wonderful cultures around the world. And you can go to the library and do a dive into the most extraordinary folk tales from Scandinavia, Japan, Russia. I mean, every culture has a wonderful, rich history of folk tales that have taken the oral tradition and then put them onto paper. This whole tradition, of course, of storytelling with the invention of the printing press with books, then into live theater, of course, with the printing press, with the creation of newspapers. It's as if the layers, the ways of connecting people has only raised its importance, that people hunger for more stories, as many as possible. And of course, with the existence of books and newspapers, it's as if we can't get enough of them, and that the proliferation of that in contemporary society, then it's exploded with the creation of radio, television, film, and all of those. I mean, we're talking about relatively young forms for storytelling, really only the 20th century, and the proliferation of storytelling in our the last century has it just exploded in the culture. All of this new and different media has given us a tremendous opportunity to use storytelling more than ever. Our whole goal here, I should say, is to help shed light for you on discovering what stories are, how to begin learning how to tell them well, in whatever form that you choose, whether it's TV, radio, film, corporate, television, theatrical. Let me start by telling you a little bit about how that translates into EMF 120, which is concept and story class, and that's really sort of the basic building block for everything that follows, which is really exploring what is story and how to find stories. And it really talks a little bit about everything that we've gone through here today. We explore how to find stories in your own life, from your own experiences. We study storytelling in fairy tales, in TV news, in documentary work, and then adapting short stories, sort of looking at it's a smorgasbord, if you will, buffet of all the different kinds of storytelling that's out there in the marketplace today, and then how you can go around and experience a little bit of all of it to see what are the basic building blocks to be successful in telling stories in all those different venues. After EMF 120, the other writing focus class is broadcast and film writing, which is really where I like to focus almost exclusively on writing short films around that concept of story equaling character and conflict. When I say short films, I mean from 3 minutes. We do a variety of them, 3 to 5, and then 10-minute films, 15 up to half-hour films, and really begin to look at some of the techniques that are critically important to storytelling in a visual media. The filmmaker John Sayles wrote a great book called Talking in Pictures, and to me that's really the essence of great screenwriting, is when you can tell a story without saying a word. And it's probably the hardest part of screenwriting, because it's that magic moment. It doesn't come easily. It's that magic moment when something happens on the screen, and it could, in that particular moment, it could play anywhere in the world and it would have the same reaction, where everyone would cry at the same time or everyone would applaud. It's that it's that quality that made Charlie Chaplin the greatest filmmaker, film star in the world back in the silent era. And you see moments like that from time to time in movies today, but it's rare. It's just the reason it's rare. It's the hardest thing to get, is to talk in pictures in a way that makes people feel it right here without saying it through dialogue. And we explore some of that in EMF 377. In EMF 405, which is a screenwriting class, that's really a class where some serious heavy lifting goes on. The challenge there is it's a semester-long project to write your own original screenplay, and it's a wonderful opportunity to explore a story on a much larger canvas than you would have otherwise, to really begin to discover characters at a much greater depth than before. We have to do character profiles and really sort of get into the flesh and blood of what it takes to create a feature-length film. I have a number of students who express a lot of the same misconceptions about storytelling. And some of the things that I like to cover in the classes, and I like to share some of those with you. One of the first things, I spent a lot of time up front here talking about meaning in stories. What do stories mean? That's one of my favorite things to show films and then ask everybody in the class to really think about how did they connect with it? What did the story mean? What did it tell them? And one of the first things I hear talking about misconceptions is I hear from students saying, I don't think it meant anything at all. In fact, I don't want to think that it meant anything. I just want to be entertained. What's wrong with that, Professor? I just want to be entertained. Well, I contend that entertainment means that if something really entertains you, if it's well done, that means that you've experienced the meaning of the story. It's connected with you. It's aroused an emotion in you. And that means that some good storytellers are at work. The stronger your emotional connection with something, the stronger its meaning, the stronger the story. You watch a good film, let's really break it down. How did they do it? How did they accomplish that from a story perspective? And this goes for anybody, whether you're, this don't have to just be the writer or to have ambitions to be a writer to do this. This is for anybody, I think, who wants to work in any aspect of the industry. It's incumbent upon you to really think about and understand how good story works. That goes for the person who sits on the news assignment desk at one of the local television channels, or if you're a young reporter for a newspaper, if you're an editor who's sitting in the edit suite cutting together the story to really keep it in focus. What is this story about, so that you can cut the picture properly? It goes for the DP who's telling that same story visually. It doesn't matter what you do, it's incumbent upon you to understand the meaning of the story that you're trying to tell. As an example of that, I don't want to think, I just want to be entertained. One of the great exercises I remember we had last semester was we showed one of the X-Men films, and I wanted to find out, why this film seemed to connect with so many of the students in the class. And it was interesting to finally sort of break through the surface on that, because so many of them were talking about the cool superpowers of the various characters and so forth. But it can mean different things to different people. But I'm just, as an example, one of the things that really came out in that class was the appeal of that whole X-Men concept as dealing with a sort of a parable about being a teenager. That these kids are outsiders. They don't fit in. They're odd. They're different. Isn't that what being a teenager is often about? It's not always comfortable. It's actually, quite painful at times, and that I think is a pretty fascinating insight into why those stories tend to work so much. Another misconception I just want to mention is that the creation of a good story is easy. Like any good craft, it takes a lot of work and discipline. It's something that you have to commit yourself to and to work very hard at, and not assume that you ever know it all. This one it's a hard one, because I can remember going through this myself. The misconception is I don't have any stories to tell. I don't have any good stories to tell, maybe. I labored under that one for a long time myself. And the fact is that each of us has a lot of stories to tell. And I would say that they're potentially great and moving stories as well. Your perspective is entirely unique from the rest of the world. And you need to begin to explore how to tap into that terrific resource. It's this whole idea of learning how to write from the inside out rather than the outside in. That's another struggle that a lot of students have, is they're so influenced by the stories that they see around them. You go to the movie house on the weekend, or the books that you read, or the things you see on TV, and your natural inclination is to copy, is to do like that because you like that. And don't feel bad about that, because we all do that. All writers start that way. And in fact, some writers, and very successful writers, refuse to watch or read anything when they're in the act of creation because they don't want to be influenced. It happens to everyone. But the key is to, as soon as possible, move past the notion of creating another pulp fiction, or whatever the popular film is that has really intrigued you, to move beyond creating that, duplicating that. But if you learn anything from all of this, is that we all have the power to tell stories within us already. It's just a matter of exercising that muscle, of tapping into it. If there's anything you take away from everything I've talked about here over the last 30 minutes or so, is that what I said before: stories are equipment for living. Everything about that is that ultimately stories have meaning. It's up to each of us to sort of explore what that is. But remember that stories are equipment for living our life. The other thing is, remember, story is character in conflict. Just take that very simple idea and apply it to all stories that you love. Begin to explore how that concept, how that idea plays out in all of the stories that you experience every day in your lives. And then finally, I'd like for you to remember that here at Towson University, story is king. Story is king no matter what it is, what aspect of the industry that you may be interested in. It all comes down to what is the story and how do we tell it well? How do we connect with the people we're trying to reach?